Welcome friends. In this video tutorial I am going to talk about the basics of wastewater treatment, and we'll be seeing the different stages of wastewater treatment and how the wastewater treatment is being done. Now I'll first tell you about the wastewater treatment, and in any kind of wastewater treatment there is two different way of handling it. One is the wastewater treatment, which is only about the watery part or the liquid part, and the second part is the treatment of the solid part that are dispensed in the water, which is called the sludge treatment. So we have to talk about both of the treatments. Now in this video tutorial I am going to talk about the basic overview of the treatment system, but in any kind of wastewater system you must know the overview, otherwise you cannot correlate each of the steps, because each of the steps are because there are a lot of different steps, and those steps are done finely to get rid of all the contaminants that are present in the water. Now in this case what we are looking at, the water is collected from the public channel network through these pipes, and the small pipes and the bigger pipe, then those pipe contains all this wastewaters from house supplies or something from wastewater stormwater basin also, and it will come into the pump station. Now the pump station will pump it towards the first round of treatment, which is called the preliminary treatment. Now first treatment is the preliminary, second treatment is the primary, then the secondary, then finally the chemical treatment or the tertiary treatment has been conducted. So if we divide it in we can divide it into four parts. The liquid treatment is divided into four parts: preliminary, primary, secondary and tertiary. So this is the preliminary treatment, then the primary treatment. So this is the primary, then secondary and then tertiary. So these four type of treatments are there. Now in the preliminary treatment, this only the mechanical treatment is being done, and in many wastewater treatment plants this primary and preliminary treatment are fused together and they call it the primary treatment. Now in this primary treatment, basically the physical apparatus are used to mechanically separate particles from the water, because the water which we collect contains solid as well as liquid parts. Now in the liquid parts they are also having the nutrient sources, because this wastewater contains the human waste. That means we are having those protein products, we are having those carbohydrate or sugar products and all these things in it, and also the fatty acid products. Now in the solid we can have many different things. That means sometimes toys are flashed down, or sometimes dollar bills are flashed down. So these things can also be collected, and those things can be separated from the water by using this preliminary treatment. Now in the preliminary treatment we use bar screens to screen all those huge elements from the water. So they screen out all these things by mechanical bar screeners. Now the second treatment is the grit removal treatment. Now in this grit removal treatment, what they are doing, they are utilizing the gravitational force, and for example like fat materials like grease materials. So they are not water soluble, they will be floating on the water if we give the time for settling them down. Now what we utilize in this case, we utilize any fat solution, and we can see all those grease which we have collected and which can passes through the bar skins can be coagulated in this step, and we can have this grease balls formation which will float, and we take those grease balls, scrap off with the help of the scum removal. Now we take up all these things with the help of scum removal, and we take and left them aside, and it will remove all those grease materials, and right after that we end up with the water, and in the water we are having small particles of other nutrient sources, but not the bigger particles, because all the bigger particles are being removed in this bar screens and the grit removal system of preliminary treatment. Now in this now right after that this enters into the primary treatment. In the primary treatment, basically primary treatment is consisting of one large basin which is called the primary clarifier. In this primary clarifier, what we are having one central ring, and with the help of central ring we have two different parts. We are having one strand here at the top, and we are having another strand at the bottom. Now both of the strands are functioning in different ways. Now this top strand, which is just moving on the surface of the water, is collecting all those small particulate matter which are floating on the water, and they drag them into one side and keep them away from the water. And the second what you can say, the layer or second system which is placed here, which is also rotating, and this second layer or second strand, what we can see, is actually slightly rotating in a very low velocity, and as a result of this rotation, it actually helps all the small sediment, all the small particles to sediment in the layer or the lower region or lower tank or reservoir tank for this primary clarifier, which is called the primary sludge. Now I am telling you this is sludge. Whenever you heard this name of sludge, the sludge means the solid waste part of a wastewater treatment. In any cases, there are this wastewater is consisting of two parts, as I have told you before. There's the liquid part, then the solid part. The solid part would be very huge solids which can easily be separated using preliminary treatment like bar screens and grit removal. But in the secondary treatment, in the primary treatment, we must remove all those small parts. We give the time for them to be sedimented utilizing the gravitational force, and they start to sediment onto the bottom, and as they sedimented, we drag them away and take them in the sludge treatment process. Now we will discuss this sludge treatment later. Now right after that, all the water which is being clarified using primary clarifier is being taken on to the second round, which is called the secondary treatment of wastewater, and this type of treatment is called the biological treatment, because in this treatment we utilize the microorganisms to purify the water or to clarify the water. Now in this kind of section, there will be two different sections. One is the aeration basin, and another will be the anaerobic chamber. Now these two things can also happen. Now in aeration basin, what we have done, we take the water from the primary clarifier, we put it onto this aeration basin, and in this basin we actually vigorously air this basin all the time, throughout the time, and we propel a fan here, and we keep on adding air bubbles onto it, and it will help some of the bacteria which we add onto this water to grow and multiply very rapidly, and those bacteria will love to eat those nutrients which are being stored onto this wastewater, because this wastewater is consisting of human waste, so bacteria can feed onto it. So we need to select the type of bacteria that we are using in this aeration basin, because those bacteria must be aerobic type, because there is a lot of air in this case. And we also design another chamber which is not which is not put in this picture, but that is called the anaerobic chamber. Inside the anaerobic chamber we also put some microorganisms, but those microorganisms are anoxic or anaerobic microorganisms which can also uptake the nutrients, but anaerobically. So that's why you give them their own room for doing this. So we set this water there, we put the microorganisms, and the microorganisms do the work for us for this part. And in the aeration basin, almost 5 to 6 hours we need to spend this water. So this is a long time at this particular point. Now right after release from this aeration basin, we have another clarifier which is called the secondary clarifier, because this clarifier is a little bit much more bigger, and this is placed in the secondary treatment. That's why it's called the secondary clarifier. In the secondary clarifier, we put this water from the aeration tank or anaerobic treatment plant, and then in this clarifier, what happens as a result of bacterial enzymatic action, all those small nutrients start to coagulate with each other, and they are going to sediment, they are going to form a layer at the bottom of this secondary clarifier as the sludge, and this is called the secondary sludge. And we can also drag this sludge for our treatment with the help of sludge treatment process. Now after that, the water will come from the secondary clarifier towards the third layer of water treatment, which is called the tertiary treatment or the chemical treatment, because in this part of the treatment we are treating this wastewater with chemicals to get rid of the bacteria or microorganisms which are left behind. Because remember, we utilize microorganisms to degrade our food or nutrient materials. That's fine, they do the job for us, but now it's time for removing those microorganisms, because if they live on the water, they can be dangerous for us, because those microorganisms can be pathogenic, can be devastating for us, so we need to kill them too. So we utilize all those chemical process to kill those microorganisms in this tertiary treatment. So we utilize all those chlorination. Sometimes chlorination can be a form of gaseous chlorine, or can be a form of liquid chlorine, or sometimes in form of tablet chlorine. Then right after this chlorination, we need to control the number of or a concentration of chlorine in the water. Remember, sometimes when the higher amount of chlorine come into the water, we can taste it really in the water. So this is the flaw of this wastewater treatment. Or sometimes this chlorine can make a damage to us, because chlorine is halide, and any halide is dangerous for human body, or any halide is dangerous for any animal. So this chlorine which we put it is in a higher concentration. Or sometimes this chlorinated water, if we directly discharge this water onto the streams, then it can damage our freshwater flora. For example, those fishes and all those phytoplankton, zooplanktons, whatever place there, they can be harmed by this chlorine. That's why we need to remove the chlorine due to some extent, or we need to take the concentration of the chlorine down to some extent. We can do this by utilizing UV disinfection, or sometimes we can just do this with the help of another chemical treatment by utilizing SO2. Sulfur dioxide is a very important key player in this case. So we add sulfur dioxide right after the addition of the treatment by sulfur dioxide or UV disinfection. Our water is totally pure and it is ready to be discharged in the stream again. So that is how the liquid part of the wastewater is traveled from preliminary treatment, which is the mechanical treatment. So this is the mechanical treatment, and then we go to the primary treatment, which is also a mechanical treatment. So preliminary and primary are the mechanical treatment. Then we go to the secondary treatment, which is a biological treatment, through which finally we end up with the chemical treatment, which is the tertiary treatment, and finally we release the water onto the stream where we have taken all this water from. Okay, so that's how it's work. Now let us talk about the sludge treatment process. Now what is the sludge treatment? As we have told before, in the primary clarifier and in the secondary clarifier, we have sedimented out many amount of all those solid materials which are being stored in this wastewater for so long. Now these nutrients are dangerous, those are toxic, but if we utilize them properly, if we process them properly, then they might end up with some very interesting and very economic product which we can utilize in the soil as a soil conditioner. So that is a very important concept. So we take up all those sludge from the primary clarifier as well as from the secondary clarifier, and we take and we go through the sludge treatment process. Now in any sludge treatment process, there are three different parts. One is the sludge digestion, then is the sludge thickening, and then is the sludge dewatering. So these three parts are really important during any sludge treatment process. So what we have seen in this case, we take the sludge, we digest the sludge. Now what we mean by the sludge digestion, it means that we are having huge pipes and pumps are there. We utilize heat, we utilize few amount of bacteria which are present on the sludge to digest the sludge anaerobically, and as a result of this anaerobic digestion of the sludge, they produces methane gases. Now in this particular process, we can utilize fewer amount of microorganisms which are methanogens. Now we know the action of methanogens, that they can utilize carbon sources and generate methane gas. Now these methanogens can act on the sludge, they can produce methane gas, and as a result of they produce this methane gas. As you can see in this case, this methane gas is a very good fuel, as we know. So we can utilize the energy which is stored in this methane gas to run few generators and few pumps in this same wastewater treatment plant. So it's a circulation of energy in the wastewater treatment plant. So it is a pretty good for us to utilize this kind of sludge digestion and the energy which is derived from the sludge digestion. Right after this sludge digestion, we utilizes the sludge thickener to make the sludge thicken. So how we can make sludge thicken? So we utilizes sludge thickeners, and in the sludge thickeners usually there are different types of sludge thickeners, like gravitational force gradient dependent and all these different types. So there are sludge thickener, a common type of sludge thickener that are used are called DAFs, or it is called dissolved air flow type of sludge thickener. Now this type of sludge thickener, what they are doing, they are actually inside a huge chamber, they push the air onto the sludge in a very high pressure, and then just release the pressure so that this sludge will float on to the top and the watery part remains on the bottom. Now as a result of this process, we can have really solid and thick sludge. Now right after this made up this sludge thickening, we have to dry the sludge. Why? Because in this particular step, or after the particular step, what we end up with a pretty thick sludge which is having almost most of the sludge components, but it is still containing a very moderate amount of water. So we need to dewater it before utilizing it for the soil conditioning purpose. Otherwise those watery part are pretty problem creating for handling and all these things. So we need to make them dry. So this drying will help us in different ways of transport and or marketing or placing them. So for that purpose we need to dry them a little bit. So we dry them, we dewater them utilizing the chambers denoting here. These chambers are called centrifugers, and we know in scientific labs we have used centrifuges, and those centrifuges are small. Those are micro centrifuges, but these centrifuges which are used in this case of sludge dewatering, these are really huge and mega centrifuges. Now in this centrifuge the mechanism is remaining the same, so it is sedimented at the bottom and the water is placed at the top, and the sludge is sedimented at the bottom. So it's a layer of sludge at the bottom. We just take out this sludge from this place, and the sludge becomes a solid cake like structure. We take the sludge, we put it on the van, we take it onto the landfill and we dump it there, and this sludge is containing very important nutrients and ingredients which will help to nourish the soil for a long time. So that's why this sludge treatment is done in this way. So this is the overall wastewater treatment process. So remember, wastewater treatment process is conducted in two different ways. One is the watery part dealing, second one is the solid part dealing. In the watery part dealing we are having four different sections. One is called the preliminary, then primary, then secondary, and the tertiary treatment. In the primary and preliminary treatment are mechanical treatments, utilizing the mechanical process to separate out solids. And in the secondary treatment we utilizes biological system like microorganisms to treat the water, and in the tertiary treatment we utilizes chemical things to actually take out all those necessary bad things from the water. Okay. And also in the chemical treatment sometimes utilizes aluminum chloride and all this type of salts to actually settle down some of the solid particles or some of the phosphorus particles which still there in this water, but most of the nitrogenous compound and phosphorus particles are gone right after the secondary treatment. So if somebody tells you which is the most important part of this system, you must say this is the biological part or the secondary treatment part, which is the most important, because in this part almost everything is treated except for fewer consideration like odor, sometimes few amount of phosphorus, dissolved phosphorus, and sometimes and those bacteria which are added, right? Except for this, the water is almost ready to be discharged onto the water stream, right? So that's why it's important. Now in the second part we are having the sludge treatment process. In the sludge treatment process we go through three different steps. One is the sludge digestion. In this case we utilize the energy from the sludge digestion to run out a few pumps and generators in our wastewater treatment plant. That's a very important part. And then we are having thickener, and also we are having those dewatering part. So these are the steps of wastewater treatment plant, and I hope it will help you to understand what it is. Thank you.